Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I'm joined again today by the beautiful Lindsey Zirker from the Kidney Nutritional Institute. And we got her back because I really wanted to talk oxalates. It is a question that we definitely get asked. And because the community is actually very well educated, a lot of you guys out there know about oxalates and know that they can be a potential issue in people with kidney disease and things like that. So I wanted to bring our expert Lindsey on, who's an expert in all things oxalate, just to talk about what they are, what foods are high in them, how do we test, and how do we treat. So Lindsey, thank you so much for joining me again. I really always appreciate you being on here and your wisdom and your time. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me back. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. So oxalates, let's just dive straight in. So what are oxalates and why should people with kidney disease even know what this word means?
Yes. So oxalates, they are a substance that are found in plants, and in plants, they serve a really helpful purpose. They help regulate minerals and help protect against external issues that could harm the plant. And but for humans, it's considered a non-nutrient. We don't need oxalates, and they just happen to be in a lot of plant foods that we eat. And so for kidney disease, we like to pay attention to them because certain conditions can arise that can make people higher risk for absorbing more oxalates, and that can increase your risk of kidney stones. And then we've also found that for people who have PKD, that reducing oxalate intake may help to reduce the risk of cyst growth, but also we've noticed a lot of different type of symptom improvement, like flank pain and joint pain and things like that.
Amazing. So what do oxalates do? So obviously I think we call them an anti-nutrient, right? Because they're really for plants and not for humans. So tell me, what do oxalates do and how do they interact with the body that makes them potentially detrimental? And why do some people handle them fine and other people don't?
Yeah. So when you eat a plant that has oxalates in it, the food will be broken down in the gut and the oxalates are released from the plants. And in the gut, some oxalates might bind with certain minerals like calcium. And that means that people aren't going to absorb those bound oxalates very well. So they'll pass out through the stool. But free oxalates are absorbed and then they're removed through the kidneys, through the urine. And sometimes people can be more prone to absorbing oxalates if they have some gut issues. One of the biggest ones is if you aren't digesting your fat very well. And this can happen if you've had your gallbladder taken out, or sometimes if you've even had you're on medications or other things that reduce your stomach acid, that will reduce the amount of enzymes to help break down your fat. And what happens then is if you have all this extra fat that isn't being broken down, then it will actually bind up the calcium. And so the calcium isn't really free to help bind up those oxalates. This can also happen if you've had any type of GI surgery, like for weight loss, like gastric bypass, things like that. And so that is one of the specific reasons why people, they might absorb more oxalates. Sometimes people may just have, there's different things that I've heard that can increase oxalate absorption. And I don't know if, like what's going on with the transporters or if it's a spike protein or whatever, but I've definitely had people hyperabsorb oxalates for like really unique individual reasons. But I think that the poor digestion is the biggest reason why people might absorb more oxalates.
Yeah, that's definitely what I see too. Okay. So how would you know if you've got an oxalate issue? What are the sort of things if I'm thinking, okay, right, maybe I've got some PKD, oxalate's an issue for me. How would I know?
So it is always a good idea to talk with your healthcare provider and ask them about it. But for PKD, there's definitely some good research showing that an oxalate managed diet can help reduce the risk of cyst growth, because when oxalates are absorbed, when they're in the body, they can bind with other minerals and they can form crystals. And if this happens in the kidney, this can form kidney stones that normally the tubules, the tubules in your kidneys will have to expand to let those kidney stones through. And for people with PKD, they found that these tubules expanding activates a process that leads to continuous tubule dilation. It increases that risk of cyst growth. And so for PKD, you may not exactly have symptoms. It's just something that's coming up in the literature is a strong correlation. But some people have found that if they have a more oxalate managed diet, they don't have as much flank pain, they don't have as much joint pain, they overall feel better because those oxalates just seem to be wreaking some havoc in their system. Other people might think they might need to manage their oxalates if they have had previous kidney stones that were calcium oxalate kidney stones. And then, or, potentially if you have a family history of kidney stones and you have other risk factors for developing kidney stones, it might be worth something considering. And then if you just, if you have some gut issues, like if you've had your gallbladder taken out, if you've had, GI surgery, or if you notice that maybe you have kind of funky looking stools, it's something good to talk with your doctor about and say, hey, is this am I digesting my foods really well? Is there a problem here? Those kind of things would be things that would make you think maybe you should consider looking at an oxalate managed diet.
Awesome. And so looking at that, then what are the foods, if someone's like, okay, well, I've been really prone to kidney stones. They're definitely oxalate kidney stones. And I had my gallbladder removed when I was 40, as that tends to be the magic age for having your gallbladder removed. Happy 40th. So what sort of foods and what does an oxalate managed diet look like? What would someone be having to be prepared for to do that?
Yes, that is such a good question. So I always remind my clients that it is an oxalate managed diet, not a no oxalate diet, for a couple of reasons. One is that oxalate data is really kind of sketchy. There's a couple of reasons for this. Oxalate in amounts in the same type of food can be different based on a lot of different environmental factors, like the type of soil, the level of ripeness when it was picked, the weather conditions, but also the testing method of the oxalates can vary. So you might see on one oxalate list that a food is high, and then on another one it's low, and then it just gets really frustrating. And when you're trying to, be really on top of your health, you're thinking, I don't even know who to trust anymore. So we just want to acknowledge that sometimes the data is conflicting and challenging, and so that there's multiple ways to manage your oxalate intake, and limiting your intake of higher oxalate foods is one of those ways. But regardless of the different testing methods or the different weather, there are some foods that tend to be pretty high in oxalates that you can rely on. And those foods are rhubarb, spinach, almonds, and let me pull up this other list here so I can remind myself. Usually potatoes with the skin on. And some of the times I recommend adjusting foods, not because in and of themselves they're super high, but we tend to eat them multiple times in a day, maybe. Some types of seeds like sesame seeds or chia seeds, again, the amount can really make a difference. Different types of beans like black beans or pinto or navy. And then you want to pay attention to the type of flour in some of your foods, like almond flour or brown rice flour, and then also beets. So those are kind of some of the higher oxalate foods that you might want to really limit or adjust your portion sizes of, if that's kind of your main way of managing your oxalate diet.
Yeah, great. And are there Foods that you can enjoy in abundance, knowing that they're really low oxalates that are also great for kidneys. I know like blueberries is one of my favorites for kidneys and has next to no oxalates in there. So are there other foods that you recommend that you go for glory? We know for sure, doesn't matter on the weather, the season, if they were biodynamic or picked on the full moon, or if someone's chanting as they were done, they're going to be low oxalates.
Right.
And are there foods where people listening, they're like, oh my goodness, what can I eat? Is there something out there which you can go, you don't have to worry about this part?
Yes, absolutely. So like if I have clients that are just like, oh my gosh, like almonds are my go-to snack, what do I do now? Macadamia nuts and pecans are a really good substitute for that. For like sesame seeds or chia seeds, a smaller portion size, or like flax or sunflower seeds, those are really good options. In place of some of your favorite beans, you can use like kidney beans or lentils or split peas, or chickpeas. And then potatoes, you can peel them, and that takes off a lot. And especially if the other added benefit of that is if you're not buying organic potatoes, if you peel them, that helps get rid of a lot of pesticides and chemicals as well. So double bonus. Radishes and jicama, those can be really nice substitutes for potatoes, especially if you're cooking them in like soups or stews, which we're kind of moving into that time of year when we want that. I didn't believe it when I saw you could substitute radishes for potatoes in a soup. I thought that is insane.
When you just said it, then I was like, radish soup for a potato. So I'm going to have a radish and leek soup rather than a potato and leek soup. But really?
Yeah, it does. I experimented on all of my friends and they didn't even know it. And they thought these are great potatoes. So
wow. Okay. You have it there, folks. You can use radishes instead of potatoes. It comes straight from Lindsey. So
that's right. Yeah, my friends all took one for the team on that happily because it worked out.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. Instead of beets, to have colorful like salads or whatever, carrots or cabbage or bell peppers, usually the amounts we eat those in seems to be a really reasonable substitute. So
what about instead of spinach? Because I know
yes,
smoothies every if you go there.
So kale is a really nice substitute, and then other types of just like lettuce. And then if you like something a little more spicy, arugula can work really good as well. And then cabbage. I didn't know if
arugula was high or not. So, okay, that's good to know. Okay.
Yeah.
So if someone says, well, I think I've got some of those symptoms, but I'm not 100% sure, are there tests that people can do to actually determine whether oxalates are an issue for them?
Yes, you can do blood and urine tests for oxalates. And I would recommend, as pretty much with any lab, that you always get more than one test done, because we know there's a lot of things that can influence hydration, especially for urine tests is a really big one. And a lot of times people go like first thing in the morning and then you're kind of dehydrated. So you want to maybe get 2 or 3 of those tests done and kind of see if there's any kind of trend, or if it's really stable, or if it's really all over the place, and look at it in a proper context so that you don't get this one lab done and then you find out later, oh, I was actually really dehydrated that day and we freaked out for no reason.
Yeah, I'm fine with oxalates.
Yeah. So, but it is really nice to get a baseline so that you can see if your interventions are enough. Because like I mentioned, you can do lower oxalate diet, but there's other things you can do too to help reduce your absorption of oxalates. So, but yeah, blood or urine tests can work really well.
Okay. And you just mentioned there are other things that you can do to reduce your oxalate absorption. What are those sort of things?
Yes. So one of the things is eating adequate calcium. So sometimes we'll have our clients track their intakes so we can kind of see where their calcium intake is like, especially with kidney disease. We want to make sure people don't go overboard on the calcium either. So that's why we have them track and we can kind of see where their intake is at. And if it's about at their estimated needs, then we're good to go. But if they're lower, then we can recommend adding some higher calcium foods, or maybe occasionally like a calcium citrate supplement. And if you are adding in those higher calcium foods or a calcium citrate supplement, it's really nice to pair those with higher oxalate foods, because remember at the beginning, if you are eating calcium with oxalate foods in the gut, the calcium will bind to the oxalate so that it won't be absorbed. And so that's a really nice way to still keep your diet pretty liberal and not have to, micromanage your oxalates. So that's a really helpful piece. And then the other thing is to make sure that you're always staying pretty hydrated. That way the urine doesn't get too concentrated. That reduces that risk of crystal formation. And then you can also include sources of citrate, which helps keep your urine at a better pH, again, reducing that risk of kidney stones. And sources of citrate could be like adding lemon or lime juice to your drinking water, using it in salad dressings, or like lemon or lime ice cubes. And then of course, like a calcium citrate, magnesium citrate, depending on what your other nutrition needs are.
Yeah, I love the citrates because they're so alkalizing. They're my favorite. They're in our alkalizing formula for that exact reason.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's such a great idea.
And fats, tell me, there's a link between fats and oxalates too, isn't there? Or just binding?
Yeah, because the fats will bind with that calcium. And so then the oxalates are more highly absorbed. So that's the other piece too, is if you are having some issues like digesting, then you may temporarily need a digestive enzyme till you can kind of get to the root issue, because digestive enzymes are fantastic, but really it is a band-aid. So
Totally
it's more ideal,
yeah,
to get to the root of, well, why am I digesting poorly? It's fine to take the enzymes till you sort that out, but continue working to say like, oh, is it because I have low stomach acid from an H. pylori infection, or is it because I had my gallbladder removed? And in that case, you may need the enzymes long term, or when you have higher fat meals. But yeah, so you can work on your gut health with your provider, and that can definitely help reduce oxalate absorption as well.
Great. And do you think if you've got a proper oxalate issue, you should be working with a healthcare provider?
I think it's always helpful, just because anytime that you start excluding things from your diet, you could inadvertently be creating nutrient holes in your diet. And I always remind people that, like, while you're here for me to help you with your kidneys, I'm not really doing you any favors if we do things to help your kidneys that hurt your gut or that hurt your heart or something else, right? So we always want to make sure that while we're supporting, one condition or body system, we're not creating a bigger issue somewhere else. And I think that it's really easy because we don't always know like what our food intake is like. And so if we start restricting oxalates, then all of a sudden, like, think about a lot of those foods I read off: almonds, spinach, beans, nuts, seeds. There's a lot of fiber in a lot of those foods. So you could inadvertently really reduce your fiber intake, then your beneficial bacteria aren't getting fed. I mean, there could be, and that's just kind of a simple one, but also like other minerals might not get absorbed, or you might not have as many sources of those minerals. So I think it's always helpful to work with a provider so that they can kind of oversee those things for you, so that you don't have to worry like, oh, have I just over restricted, or have I created a new problem?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. That's good advice. So what else do people need to know about oxalates, Lindsay? What else have we not covered here? I like it because this is nice to the point, which people like. But is there anything else you want to add about oxalates and what people need to look out for with them?
I think the big thing would be to just not get too worried about how many milligrams of oxalates a day you're eating, because it's kind of like a law of diminishing returns. There's a certain amount of attention you can give to oxalate in your diet and you can see benefit. But then there's a certain amount, if you are giving too much attention to it, then you can get reduced benefit and create more issues. Again, it's so important to pay attention to your diet when you're trying to work on your health, but we don't want to be creating unhealthy relationships with food, more fear, or more stress. because those things are going to harm other aspects of your health. And so I think that that's another reason to work with a provider, because they can help you find a balanced approach. So just acknowledge if you have to pay attention to oxalates to support your health, then acknowledge it and then say, okay, what is the amount of focus that I need to dedicate to this? And then don't get too micromanagey about it.
Oh, I think that's great advice, because a lot of the comments that we got on YouTube were people cutting out foods, and because there's misinformation. So someone was asking me about blueberries being high in oxalates, and my blueberries are not high in oxalates at all. So I agree, that whole fear thing that we can get around just having anything to eat. And I think also, a lot of people with autoimmune diseases and things like that are trying the carnivore diet, which I think short term, that's great if you've got proper allergies to chemicals and plants like oxalates. Short term, those kind of diets work, but we know with kidney disease, those things do not work long term because of the protein. But I think it's the same sort of thing. So it's being able to find balance and harmony without creating fear around food. And as we know, fear feeds the kidneys and weakens the kidneys. So
absolutely,
I think that's all good advice there. So thank you.
Yeah.
So I think that's our final word on oxalates, but definitely something to look out for, specifically if you're very prone to forming kidney stones and polycystic kidney disease. I've definitely seen the same literature to show that with the tubule expansion and the crystal formation, there's some definite correlations there. So Lindsey, thank you as always for your expertise and time and knowledge. I really appreciate it, and exactly how you put things forward for people to understand nice and easily. It's always greatly appreciated. If you have decided that you absolutely have an oxalate issue and you would like to work with a practitioner, you can head over to the Kidney Nutritional Institute and click on About Us and Practitioners, and you'll find all of Lindsey's details there. I'll put that in the show notes below. If you'd like to contact her to work with her, she's an absolute expert in kidney diets and very much autoimmune diseases related to kidneys. So if you think you've got a thyroid issue, if you've got lupus or any of those autoimmune, IgA nephropathy, those kind of things, and Lindsey's your gal to chat to about that. She's got an absolute interest in autoimmunity and the link to kidneys there. Again, I'll put all her details below. If you want to know more about what we do, head to www.kidneycoach.com. And if you want to be informed every time we put out a video, make sure you hit subscribe. And if you have any comments, or you'd like Lindsey or me to interview anyone on any specific areas, make sure you leave some comments below and I will get back to you. Hey, Lindsey, thanks again. Always appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll get you back on again. I think there's a few more things I want to pick your brains about, so we'll have to do that.
Thanks so much for having me, Fiona. It's always great to chat with you.
Yeah, you too. All right, you enjoy the rest of your evening. And again, thanks for being part of our community. We will see you next time. Bye.